to show that planning for pedestrians is not something new here in Belmont. And generally, it follows our updates of our comprehensive land use plan. So you can see in 2007 is when we adopted a comprehensive land use plan, and a couple years later, we adopted our first ever pedestrian master plan here for Belmont. Subsequently, in 2018, we updated our comprehensive land use plan, and we actually applied for a grant to update our pedestrian master plan in 2020, but were unsuccessful in that grant award. We were granted funding by NCOT in 2021 to provide a pedestrian plan update, and that's what we are undergoing right now, and we are anticipating adoption of that update prior to the end of 2023. So again, followed another comprehensive land use planning effort by the city of Belmont. So, as I said, we are underway with an update, and I just wanted to kind of give you some key milestones and timelines as to how that process has evolved to date. We started in February of 2022 with a steering committee kickoff meeting. We then held our first public meeting in April of 2022. We also held a public engagement opportunity by setting up a booth at Garibaldi Goes Green to engage the public on pedestrian planning needs and efforts there. In the spring of 2022, leading into May, we also held virtual stakeholder interviews with 5 key groups of representatives here in Belmont. That's the business and development community, environmental representatives, community group representatives, health and wellness representatives, and support services representatives, which does include the school system as well. Following that, we had our second steering committee meeting, and then in the summer of 2022, staff was reviewing the draft data provided by the consultant, as well as undergoing, in conjunction with the consultant, a sidewalk conditions inventory of the existing sidewalk network here in the city of Belmont. That inventory also resulted in GIS data and analysis on conditions for our entire sidewalk network. Leading into the fall of 2022, we held our second public meeting at CityWorks, followed by some neighborhood meetings, 3 specifically, one hosted in the Reed community at Belmont Community Center, one hosted in North Belmont at North Belmont Elementary School at one of their events with all of their students and families there, and then one on the peninsula, which was hosted at South Point United Methodist Church. In early and mid-2023, the consultant has been coordinating with staff to draft a plan, or that draft plan development. And that leads us to where we find ourselves now. So at the end of August, the third and final steering committee meeting was held here in Belmont. And then what we're doing right now is the steering committee is underway with looking at the final draft of the plan and providing any final comments for consideration. The consultant will then be incorporating any of those final remaining comments into the draft plan and going ahead and submitting it to NCOT for review. While NCOT is underway with reviewing that document, they have already authorized us to go ahead and present that information to both Planning Board and City Council at a joint presentation. And we don't have an exact date on that joint meeting. We're trying to make sure that there's minimally as many conflicts are avoided as possible in that, so that as many representatives of Planning Board and City Council can be present to hear that presentation as possible. But we will notify everyone as soon as that final date is scheduled. We're looking at around mid-October, mid to late October, so that's the target there. We would hope that at that meeting, council may consider adoption of that plan. Of course, that would be contingent on the final comments and review by NCOT, but they're comfortable with that approach. NCOT has noted that their review would be anticipated prior to the end of 2023. And just a side note, we are not stopping our planning efforts there. The city was also awarded a grant to create a multimodal network plan, and that is scheduled to begin in 2024 in conjunction with our comprehensive land use plan update. What this will do is allow us for the first time, instead of allowing for planning of pedestrians following our comprehensive land use plan, to actually look at these efforts simultaneously so that we can really balance land use and transportation together for the city of Belmont and our vision for our future. So just wanted to share some excerpts about some of the things that are included in the draft plan. That this is the purpose of the draft plan. So the Belmont Pedestrian Plan update envisions the city of Belmont as a place where walking is safe, accessible, fun, and supportive of an active and healthy lifestyle, where people of all ages and abilities can move and access their daily needs safely by foot and by all forms of active transportation. So, you may have seen these materials before. This was part of our public outreach during the development of our plan update. And so these are a poster series set. There are 5 different areas that come together as to why we should plan for pedestrians. But in tonight's conversation, I wanted to really focus on the safety benefits of pedestrian planning and call out some highlights here. One is that we have seen non-motorist fatalities increase. This is a nationwide statistic, by 43% in a 10-year period between 2010 and 2019. So that's not a Belmont statistic, but nationwide, we have seen an uptick in pedestrian fatalities or non-motorist fatalities across the board. Putting walking first helps to slow traffic speeds without lowering its flow and greatly reducing the risk of accidents. When an urban environment encourages walkability, public spaces are activated and the perception of safety increases. The more people that are out there, the more eyes on the street, the more people feel safe. Roadways without sidewalks are twice as likely to have pedestrian crashes as sites with sidewalks on both sides of the street. So that, again, was a precursor to the plan itself, but some of the data that's included in the draft of our pedestrian plan update is some crash data. So there have been 85 crashes, and this is since the end of 2022, so it does not include our most recent incident here in Belmont. But from 2007, this data is from 2007 to 2020, SDOT reported 85 crashes involving pedestrians in Belmont. Okay? There are recommendations of what we can do to reduce that crash reduction, including our largest percent decrease if we install sidewalks to avoid walking in the roadway. Still a really significant decrease with increased enforcement to reduce vehicle speed. And install pedestrian refuge islands. And add exclusive pedestrian phasing to signalized intersections. So those are some suggestions on how we can greatly reduce crash reduction with pedestrians here. Also important data that's included in the draft plan update relates to the survivability of a pedestrian based off of the vehicle speed on that roadway. And so you can see here that if a vehicle is traveling at 45 miles an hour, a pedestrian has a 35% chance of survival. If they are traveling at 35 miles an hour, 68%. And lastly, if vehicles are traveling at 25 miles an hour, that pedestrian has an 89% chance of survival if it comes in contact with the moving vehicle. One of the goals of our pedestrian plan update is to increase safety. And so you see that also highlighted on the screen. This data analysis included a safety analysis which showed that streets in Belmont, they analyzed all of the safety, and it showed which streets are the most dangerous. So those were included as a factor on the resulting pedestrian mitigation recommendations that will be coming forth as a part of that plan update. There are 3 main packages for pedestrian improvements proposed within the pedestrian plan update. One is a North Belmont improvement package. One are downtown pedestrian safety improvements, and that is the package that's zoomed in on the right there. And the third is an Eastern Belmont improvement package. What you can see is these are areas where we are seeing larger growth volumes in the city of Belmont than we have historically, and so we are actively working to provide recommendations in those areas, although these are not the only recommendations included in the draft report. These are just the focus areas highlighted. In addition to location areas for improvements and safety improvements, there are also some program recommendations for our consideration as we move forward, including 3 that are specifically focused on pedestrian safety. Those include Watch for Me NC, which is a comprehensive program run by the NCDOT in partnership with local communities, specifically aimed at reducing the number of pedestrians and bicyclists hit and injured with crashes from vehicles. The second is a program called Let's Go and See. And this program includes an all-in-one package of lessons plans, materials, activities, and videos that are really aimed at teaching and encouraging our children to practice and develop safe pedestrian practices and behaviors while promoting healthy transportation choices and active lifestyles for our community. And lastly is Vision Zero. Vision Zero is a traffic safety approach focused on eliminating traffic deaths and serious injuries while improving access to safe, sustainable, and equitable mobility for everyone. So, one of the other things I wanted to just share as a part of the conversation relates to how we plan for pedestrians when we are considering new development here in the city of Belmont. As a reminder, City Council in 2021, October 2021, actually adopted some updates to our Land Development Code Chapter 16, which updated our TIA requirements, our traffic improvement analysis requirements, to include bike and pedestrian traffic considerations. This means that there is a collection of bike and pedestrian traffic counts in all TIAs moving forward, subsequent to the October 2021 adoption. This update also included multimodal operational analysis for new developments within the Center City Small Area Plan, which includes recommendations in that TIA for any off-site bike and pedestrian mitigation that might be necessary due to the new development. So just to zoom in graphically on what areas require that, this is a copy of our Center City Small Area Plan on the left. And on the right, you can see an excerpt of recommended transportation improvements that are planned in our adopted long-range planning as well. Those include, but are not limited to, proposed sidewalks, proposed multi-use paths, as well as proposed bike lanes. Not only is this area highlighted within our comprehensive land use planning efforts, it is also consistent with the identified downtown districts and consistent with the goals of our Main Street program and their work plan, which highlights the need to distinctly connect our downtown districts with all forms of transportation, including trolley, trails, sidewalks, and streets, in order to offer a variety of experiences for our residents and guests. So the action item that was discussed back in 2021 is how do we get here? With a consensus that the way that we get here is by increasing public safety and walkability in our downtown districts. I would say to expand upon that, the goal should be everywhere, but we have to focus somewhere, and where we have the largest incidents occurring are in the central corridors of town. So just to recap on that effort, in 2020, prior to the adoption of this update, you did see bike and pedestrian data included in the site access evaluation for new development, as well as in any mitigation agreements where it made sense, but there wasn't as much data. So for projects October 2021 moving forward, we now have added in bike and pedestrian traffic volume counts, bike and pedestrian operational analysis, as well as bike and pedestrian offsite mitigation recommendations. And the final topic I wanted to share with you this evening is related to some conversations that the City of Belmont staff has recently had with NCDOT relating to the development of a transportation committee here in Belmont. So as a reminder, you all have a transportation committee among City Council, which is actually effectively made up of by every single member of City Council. What we are proposing is maybe modifying the membership of that transportation committee in order to have more collaborative conversation with parties that are needed to be at the table so that we can really effectively talk about the needs as well as the resolutions for those concerns. And so the purpose of the proposed transportation committee would be to develop this to discuss Belmont's needs and regularly meet with NCDOT to ask questions and provide local updates. Committee members can share those questions and concerns with NCDOT and serve as City Council liaisons. So what we're recommending is that 2 City Council members be a part of this committee as representatives for the city council as a whole. Committee members would then report those transportation updates to city council, so that city council as a whole can talk about local priorities and solutions for identification. And so how that would look as proposed is that, again, it could include 2 city council members, SDOT representatives from the division, as well as any others that are necessary for the conversations on the agenda. Members of city staff, not just planning staff, but any affected departments that could include planning, police, public works, and others, as well as members of the GCL NPO staff. And so everybody coming to the table and really figuring out solutions to some of the concerns raised within our community. And that's what I have.
Okay. Any questions for Tiffany?
No, just a comment. I think we very much appreciate this because I think a number of people, based on what some of us have been hearing through social media, had no idea that we had anything in place. And certainly for a long time we have, and we're in the process of updating it. So I appreciate that because I think that at least will allay some of the concerns that people have that we were not looking into this at all, and we certainly have been. So thank you.
You're welcome.
The pedestrian plan, once updated, what is its effect? I mean, is it, you talked about recommendations, is it, once implemented, is it binding? Like, how does it play into what we do as a city?
Sure, great question. So when new development comes to the table, anything that's included on any adopted plans in the city are recommended as part of our site plan reviews. I would say equally as important, if not more important, is this document as a tool for city council to make decisions related to the infrastructure and funding of infrastructure that might be needed. And so this could help to inform the capital improvement plan process and really bring projects to the top that are identified as priorities for the city for new infrastructure. But it would also allow city staff to look and seek grants that help us to meet the identified recommendations within the planning document.
And just as a courtesy for Jason, if we don't have that master plan, we don't qualify for grants. So that's a very important part of what we do. So thank you.
This updated membership of the transportation committee, would it potentially include members of the public at large, or would it only include staff and agency representatives?
This is really a recommendation from staff, and really it's your committee, so that would be up to city council.
That's not a bad idea, though. Have some public membership on that committee.
Yeah, whether it's at large for the public or incorporate the PMZ, I think they would be really good candidates as well. I mean, they should be at the table for these types of discussions, in my opinion.
So how do we feel about the committee as a concept?
I think it's needed. I think it's overdue, right? I mean, particularly with the representation from NCDOT. Again, I'm the council member for NPO. Previously, it was Richard Turner, and we do get a lot accomplished there, but we don't have the one-on-one relationship and conversations with NCDOT members that this could be or potentially provided. So I think this is absolutely necessary.
And it's my understanding that this model has been used in other municipalities to some effect, right?
That is correct, although I do think that municipalities can cater that to their specific needs. So in terms of the exact membership, I do think that there's flexibility, but the invitation from NCDOT has been extended to sit down on a regular basis and have communication with them.
What is a regular basis for NCDOT? I mean, is it quarterly? Like, how does that look like?
Sure. What's proposed right now is to start quarterly, because a lot of the project updates are larger projects. They don't necessarily have to be, but to allow for time to implement some of or research some of the things that are discussed at that table. What we are proposing to start off with is quarterly. Of course, if there's something that comes up in between those, it's not that we wouldn't have an opportunity to reach out, but just as a placeholder on everyone's calendar to go ahead and lock that in at least quarterly.
And one more question. When we say NCDOT representatives, we know that that's kind of a large organization. Who
Sure.
is included in that representation?
Sure. So I think it may be catered a little bit to specific items that are on that agenda for the meeting, but standing as placeholders would be representation from Division 12, so.
That's what I was.
And you're correct, we have to continue to deal with them because supposedly this week they're supposed to take care of the custody on Hartfield Drive. I talked to them, I think Miles had as well. So it's gonna take us continuing to remind them and be very firm about it because otherwise we're gonna have more problems.
And to that point, that's been a problem in perpetuity for quite a while.
Well, I would just like to say, I like the structure of this committee, and I agree with someone from planning and zoning being on there, but I do also like the idea of having an ad hoc, one or two citizens on that board as well.
Okay.
So it sounds like we want 2 council members, a representative from P and Z, and I'm still when we say P and Z, we mean the planning and zoning board. And then 1 or 2 citizen representatives.
As well as it looks like maybe a staff, somebody from actual P and Z, not
Yes.
just the board.
I'm assuming that would be you as the staff member for the liaison, or has that been discussed as the staff member?
We talked about it in-house, about who is the best representative, not to overload any particular staff member, so that's still being discussed. We wanted to hear from council first and then try to formulate it. We've also reached out to NCDOT. They have these kind of quarterly meetings with other municipalities, like Tiffany said. So as far as the first meeting, the kickoff meeting, reached out yesterday, anticipating this conversation here to see when we could start it. And they have not reached back out to me, but I will get that as soon as possible. We'll line it up.
I would like to strongly suggest that you look at Taylor Scott. I think that Taylor had sent an email to you, Mark and Richard. I was not privy to it, but someone forwarded it to me, and it delineated a lot of information, some of which I was surprised to know about with different neighborhoods. So I would just strongly consider putting Taylor Scott in the mix for that.
Okay.
I have that email. I'll leave it for Jamie to pass out to everybody because it was quite,
Yes, it was very, very thorough,
yes, it was.
very well written. Okay.
For voting purposes, does the membership of this committee need to be an odd number? Is it, I mean, if we're talking about whether we choose one
Sure.
member from the public, 2, could it be an odd number?
So, from my understanding, and I will defer to Miles, this group wouldn't necessarily be voting as much as communicating and having continued dialogue, bringing back information ultimately for city council to vote upon. So I'm not sure that that's as much of a consideration, but I do think we would need to amend the transportation committee that's currently been appointed, as it currently contains all of you, in order to select 2 members to that, as well as I would say, action may be needed to determine selection and longevity of any citizen members to this group, whether we do that similar to the advisory boards from the city, or if there's another selection process or term that you all would want, just to provide some direction and clarity on how to be considered for that role.
Yeah, I think the main goal of this board is to facilitate communication between the city and NCDOT. A lot of our largest challenges are on state-maintained and owned roads. So, and DOT is a big organization, North Carolina is a big state. So, I think there's real value in having some sort of regular cadence with them so that we are getting our issues in front of the decision makers at DOT who can then help us help the people of Belmont. So, less of a policy setting board and more of a
Yeah.
representative board, I think. So as far as direction to staff, it sounds like there's consensus on 2 council members, some sort of staff representative from planning, possibly. We'll defer that to you, I think. And then a representative from planning and zoning. And do we want maybe 2 citizen representatives?
I'm fine with 2.
Yeah.
And my only question about that with council and citizen representation on that, what would be the tenure? I mean, when would people roll on and off? Would we do that yearly or?
I think with our other boards, it's 3 years,
That's
right?
typical.
Yeah.
For most boards, I think some like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and what we could even do is we could stagger it, like the first two people we appoint, you know, one of them could basically be like a half term, the other would be a full term, and then you kind of got a stagger there. You know, that would be appropriate.
And the council membership would be subject to determination at the organizational meeting each year.
Right, right.
Would you like to interview them like you do other board, is a part of citizens concerns included in that?
I think that would be a good idea.
You know,
So you want them to submit an application?
Yes, I would say to get this board off the ground, if there's a way to sort of accelerate that process a little bit, then we're a little off cycle. Because I think we were trying to do the interviews like every 6 months, right?
They would set to be the fall ones in October, November, so we would be coming right up.
Oh, okay, so maybe the timing will work out on that then.
Yes.
Okay.
So I will add that as an option for the citizen boards. And then I would suggest doing, can't do half of 3 years because it makes it really
Well, right,
complicated.
yeah.
So we would do 1 year, if you wanted to stagger them for one person and 3 years for another. So then you get them staggered that way.
That's fine.
That's how we typically do it on other boards.
Okay.
and I assume that the appropriate drafting will need to be done to make these changes to the transportation committee and rules of procedure and whatnot could need to be amended or adopted as appropriate.
I would think so. We can bring that back to a future council meeting.
Well, I mean, I think we're all in agreement that this is what should be done, but we need to make sure that it's done properly and constituted correctly, based on what's currently in the books. So, that's what, I think we can give direction, but, that's what we need to vote on, in order to set this up as we'd like to see it.
Almost like bylaws.
Bylaws,
Yeah, I mean, you
Yes.
can have terms and things like that.
I mean, because, the transportation committee, just like a lot of the other committees, once we started doing the workshops, we're all, the committee consists of all of us, but, there's a, the origin, those committees must originate from somewhere. It's gotta be, in some ordinance or policy or somewhere, and I would assume if we're changing the membership of the committee to do all these things, we need to likewise change whatever mechanism set up the transportation committee to begin with, so that all this is, legal and everything.
I'm sure staff will set up the mechanics of it appropriately.
Okay. So do you have enough direction on the transportation committee? Okay, all right. Do we have any other feedback or conversation on the pedestrian plan aspect of the presentation?
No, it's very timely that it seems to be coming out now, and I'm glad to hear that we will have opportunity for some funding to bring some of these things to realization. Grants.
Do we know what the total, I'm sorry, Tiffany, go ahead first. Sorry.
I was going to say that grants are something that we would need to apply for,
Sure.
and this gives us the foundation to go ahead and submit applications for anything that's identified as a council priority. So if there are locations, there are a lot of recommendations within this plan that council would like us to have as a starting point. That feedback will be helpful as we continue the conversation in the formal presentation.
You mentioned a grant earlier in your presentation. How much was that for, out of curiosity?
Which grant?
The specific one that I guess you mentioned earlier.
The one to generate, the one for the update.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, sure. So the one provided by NCOT for the update, they covered 80% of the cost
Okay.
for plan creation, and we covered the remaining 20%. So I don't have that exact dollar figure, and I don't want to misquote you there, but it is an 80-20 split. And we were grateful enough to be able to be awarded both for the original plan creation as well as the update with that opportunity from NCDOT, as well as receive a grant for the creation of our multimodal network plan in the same grant program structure. So an 80-20 split.
Gotcha.
I had a couple questions. On the educational programs that you talk about in there, and if I'm intruding on the police department's presentation, just let me know. But how are those typically delivered?
Sure, so I will defer to Corky on that, but I would say that a lot of the program recommendations, whether they're the safety ones or any other program recommendations, within plans like this often involve collaboration between multiple departments and entities to bring them forward, right? So you may see one department as the lead on some of these planning initiatives, but they're certainly not doing that in isolation. And so some of these, as you see, might be geared more towards education and working with our children. Some might be geared more towards enforcement, and that might be more of a police initiative. Some might be marketing, and planning might be involved in some of those on the catching things on the front end, right? So we would look at each one of these program recommendations and see who should be the lead as well as who needs to be at the table.
Okay. And could you flip back to the slide on the speed limits? That one really caught my eye. I thought the graph down there at the bottom with the different speed limits was kind of interesting, because typically if you're going slower, I mean, you theoretically reduce the chance for a collision. But then also these statistics about the chance of survival are also kind of telling too, because obviously if the car's going slower, there's less force involved, so you stand a better chance of not sustaining a serious injury from that. Do we have, I think our citywide speed limit is 35, right? Unless it's otherwise posted.
That's correct, and there are some streets, Park Street is an example, where it was originally 45 and got lowered. It's a state street, but it was lowered to 35.
How much authority do we have over speed limits on state roads?
I believe that we can request, we cannot make that final determination, but we can request speed lowering, and then they can do analysis and evaluation to determine what's possible and what.
Okay, okay. Because that was something I'd be kind of interested to. I'm assuming the plan kind of speaks to maybe some areas where there's opportunity to tweak the speed limit.
There may be some contained within the pedestrian plan update. I would say you would likely see even more of those type of recommendations within the multimodal network plan as it relates to not just pedestrian planning, but more of a comprehensive solution for the city.
Okay, okay. Because I was talking to some people yesterday about Catawba Street in particular, and there are certain sections of that road, especially through some of the downtown areas where it's still 35. I think in some areas it's like 20 or 25. I forget exactly.
It's like 20 by the stores, I think.
Right.
But then it is like 35, like right outside of the Chronicle.
Right. Yeah, and that was one in particular that, like, that just seemed like a sort of low-hanging fruit as far as opportunity to maybe adjust speeds in there.
Sure. And that actually is consistent with what we're seeing from the development community, right? Development is growing out of adjacency from downtown, right? It's spreading out. And so you're seeing that slower speed limit within our core downtown area. And now we're seeing development adjacent to that really effectively becomes part of our community's downtown. And so we can certainly look at that and make some requests for consideration. Along Catawba specifically, there are some efforts also underway for additional mid-lot crossings with signalization and what's called rapid flashing beacon crossing notification. So not the exact same solution as what's done at the Keener and Catawba intersection, but also an improvement for the crossing that's more than just the thermoplastic striping you would see on the pavement itself. So I think that will in part help, but agreed that we would be happy as staff to look at working with NCDOT to reduce some speed where it makes sense and is appropriate on Catawba.
Okay. Could we maybe look at just the downtown area as a whole and see if there are any other, because that was just what kind of came up in conversation, but I'm sure there are others, because I don't know that anybody's looked at it sort of at that level before.
On the speed reduction
Right.
specifically?
Yeah, like if there are any like in the downtown area where, you know, we can just kind of see it might make sense to maybe go ahead and get those requests in,
Sure.
assuming the rest of the council feels like that's a worthwhile endeavor.
Do you have a specific speed in mind or just a request to analyze it for
Well,
reduced speeds?
I would think that 25 makes sense in our downtown districts because of the density of and the mix of like the commercial, the residential, the number of pedestrians you have in that area. So like if there were any, I don't know if there are any above 35 there, but if there were any that it makes sense to take from 35 down to 25, you know, I'd definitely be interested in exploring that.
Sure, we will go ahead and look at making that request and what that would entail.
Okay.
Tiffany, is there any data available? I'm looking at your crash reduction measures here. Obviously, the signalized crosswalk that was just installed here in Catawba, that's a longer term, more costly than ever, and I'm sure there's some other intersections that might warrant that after your study.
Sure.
But even just short of that, as more of a shorter term solution at some of these really high traffic intersections, that thermoplastic striping, if we were to look at something like that, I'm just thinking about like Central and Main, Central and Keener,
Sure.
that gets a lot of walking traffic. I imagine maybe that's incorporated into the study results that we're going to be seeing, just
It
as a
is.
shorter term solution for some of these.
It is, and so that's one of the reasons I highlighted this downtown pedestrian safety package again. We do see the majority of our pedestrians in this area, but we see pedestrians all over the city of Belmont. We're a very active community. But specifically in the downtown area, all of those dots that you see in red are recommendations for intersection improvements within our pedestrian plan update. Those have been packaged together so that city council can have discretion, bid them all in its entirety as one bid package if you so choose, or you can segment them out to specific intersections that you feel need it most. And so those would be listed out for you as a part of that plan, and there are estimates at some of the top recommendation locations within that package as well. Just to use as a starting point with estimates, one thing to keep in mind is they are just at their high-level estimates. They have not been put out for bid, and depending on the time of the investment, the plan also notes that costs right now have been increasing about 7% year over year for pedestrian infrastructure when we bid it out. So the plan is about to be, adopted by the end of the year. But those cost projections, if we're looking at it from a CIP perspective, they're estimates as of now, but they may increase as we continue. But they're there as a baseline for us to use in planning and development.
And there is a possibility, sometimes if you ask DOT to do something, they will. If we think there's some crosswalks that need to be marked, we may be able to get them to do that. I know when they repaved right in front of Webb Elementary, I have grandchildren there, and nobody thought to restripe the crosswalk at Kramer Woods, and that's a huge development. It took me 2 times, but Mark Stafford finally got that done, because they just kind of lost it off the list. So there is that possibility that we could get some of those kinds of things marked if we ask, the appropriate questions.
Yeah, it can't hurt to ask. I mean, all I can say is no.
Well, the funny thing I will say, I'll take that 1 minute, I called up to thank him for that, and the woman who was up front said she didn't know where he was. I said, I just wanted to thank him. She said, let me go find him. Because she said, nobody had called to thank us for anything. And so I thanked him because it was a safety concern. So if we have safety concerns and they can do something, I think they certainly will.
Tiffany, are all and most of these streets in the downtown area you've got highlighted there, streets which are under our control, or are there some that we would have to reach out to the DOT for approval?
Sure, this is a mix. As a reminder though, this planning grant, one of the nice things about it is it's made possible by NCDOT. So NCDOT has been having a seat at the table throughout these conversations and is aware. So when we go to them, if there are recommendations that are also included in an NCDOT supported plan update, we are always hopeful as staff that those will be better received by the department.
Anything else for Tiffany?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you.
All right, next up we've got Chief Falls. Oh, yes, that might actually not be a bad idea.
Do we need to wait until
I would like to wait.
Do we need to wait until tax is established procedurally?
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. How about this, we can kind of talk amongst ourselves about who we think might be a good fit for that. And then once staff has an ordinance ready to go, the structure and legally creating it and everything, we can just go ahead and appoint the council representatives and then start interviewing the citizen representatives.
Ready?
citizens. Just a brief introduction of who I am. I'm Chief Falls. My name is Corky Falls. I'm the Chief of Police here in Belmont. Let's see. Get where we're at here. Okay, here we go. All right, so what I want to do is I want to highlight some of the different things that's been going on with pedestrians. Some of the pedestrians, I'm going to dive a little bit into it. I'm going to do a brief overview of some of the different collisions involving pedestrians and some of the ways that we're involved in traffic safety and trying to minimize all the things that go on in the city as far as speeding complaints and collisions and trying to minimize it and mitigate it as much as we can. What I did was I went back for 3 years. I didn't go back quite as far as what Tiffany did because I wasn't aware of that at the beginning of all this. So I went back 3 years where I knew I could get good hard data. And so this is the total collisions and pedestrian collisions from 2021, 2022, and then now to current. And the total accidents that we've had in 2021 was 1,820. And pedestrians were involved in 5 of those. There was 0 fatalities, 0 serious injuries, and 5 minor or no injuries in 2021. In 2022, we had a total of 2,046 total accidents. Fatalities, we had 2. We had 1 serious injury and 5 minor or no injuries with pedestrians being involved in 6 of those.
So the numbers don't.
Yeah, I see that
We've
now.
got 6 pedestrians involved, but 8.
Yeah, 8 total, yeah. So, fine. And now we have 8. We had 1 fatality, 1 serious injury, and 6 minor or no injuries with 1,235 total accidents. This is just an overview map of the colors are actually the years. It's where locations of some collisions have occurred involving pedestrians. As you can see, we've had some. This is highlighting the fault of pedestrian or the driver as far as it goes as it relates to the collisions that are involving pedestrians in 2021, 2022, and 2023. In 2022, we had a hit and run, as everyone probably knows, on East Catawba Street on 723, happened in the evening, 9:29 or 9:39 p.m. I'm going to kind of go over what transpired. So, officers arrived on scene and located the victim who was walking with her family when a dark truck drove over past the white line and struck the victim. The victim was walking in a bicycle lane. Crime scene, our traffic unit, and our detectives arrived on the scene to try to figure out everything together, piece everything back together. On 3 days later, on July 26th, our Officer Reagan, our school resource officer, during the break from school, he actually was working patrol and he spotted the suspect vehicle seen on video and a matching description given by witnesses. We had several witnesses come forward and we had several videos along the route leading the scenes of the hit and run. He actually made contact with a person at a residence here in town, and it ended up a suspect was interviewed that same day, and he confessed to the hit and run. The suspect was arrested that same day, and on August 15th, just recently, the suspect went sent to prison for 13 to 25 months active time, and then afterwards he will serve 6 to 17 months suspended sentence probation after his active sentence. He did receive some time served for being in jail the whole entire time from the time he was arrested until the court proceedings occurred. In 2023, collisions involving pedestrians. On March the 5th, we had a pedestrian who was traveling by foot on a sidewalk on North Central Avenue. A vehicle left the roadway and struck the pedestrian and left the scene. The pedestrians sustained minor injuries. And what I'll tell you, through all of these different pedestrians being struck, if the people left the scene, we called them. In Walmart in May, we had a pedestrian that was exiting Walmart and crosswalk. The vehicle was traveling at a low rate of speed and turned off the parking aisle and not see the pedestrian crossing. The pedestrian was struck and sustained no injuries. In June, we had a pedestrian struck at South Main and Central. A vehicle was stopped at the red light. While stopped, the pedestrian traveling on a bicycle collided with the rear of the stopped vehicle. The pedestrian sustained minor injuries. In August PVA in June, we had a pedestrian struck. The vehicle was exiting the parking spot in reverse, and while doing so, struck a pedestrian who was walking behind the vehicle. The pedestrian sustained minor injuries. And then in August, we had a pedestrian, while impaired across 7 lanes of traffic on Wilkerson Boulevard, a vehicle traveling eastbound swerved to miss the pedestrian, and did miss the pedestrian, but the second vehicle was unable to avoid, because of the slight distance, was able to avoid the pedestrian, struck the pedestrian, resulting in a fatality. And on 826 at Walmart, a vehicle was exiting the parking spot in reverse while doing so. He struck a pedestrian traveling in a motorized wheelchair. It sits lower to the ground, so it's not as easy to see. And pedestrians sustained no injuries. In the Harris Teeter parking lot, vehicle was exited a parking spot. While doing so, he struck a parked vehicle. At that time, they decided to leave the accident and struck another vehicle. And then the driver attempted to leave the scene once again and backed into a pedestrian who sustained some minor injuries. We were able to get a tag number, fortunately for citizens who called in. It worked out. Before this gentleman got into his home, he parked his truck behind his house. We called him and arrested him. On Keener and Parkdale, just recently, a 5-year-old pedestrian was attempting to cross Keener Boulevard after his 15-year-old and 9-year-old siblings, they went out in the roadway first. A vehicle traveling northbound at 10 miles an hour who had reduced speed after noticing the older siblings, they were on the double yellow line, struck the 5-year-old pedestrian who was sustained some injuries to his head, and he's expected to make a full recovery. I'll say that the 2 children, 15 and 9, darted out into the road. I think they realized that they couldn't beat the car. The car seen them at the same time they seen it. I don't think the 5-year-old child seen the car and sustained some injuries, but the car speed was not a factor in this collision. I can say that for certain. And luckily for the fact that the driver did slow down because of the other children, I feel like it's a better outcome.
And Corky, that driver stayed on the scene for help.
Yes, ma'am. The driver stayed on the scene, and we seized the vehicle. All vehicles after a certain year have what we call black box. So what we do is we get Gasoline Police Department, this traffic unit. They have all of the different download software capable of downloading what we call a black box. Everyone has one under their seats. You probably don't know it's there, but that's that thing that when you're trying to look for things that gets in your way. So that thing in the middle under your driver's seat. So what the investigation is still ongoing, but one of the things that we'll do with that vehicle is we'll download that to verify the speed and verify before pre-collision, post-collision, and all those things. There's a lot that information will give us. It's kind of like a trip computer, and everyone has it in their car. Can't remember the exact year, somewhere around 2000. Everyone has it now. So that investigation is still ongoing, so I kind of don't want to really dive any deeper into that one. So here's 2021 current vehicle collision types. What we have and what we try to be is proactive at the police department. We get many complaints about speeding. We have what we call our streets. You call them a value, sometimes we call them our problem child streets. But these are streets where we have reoccurring issues, and we know we have reoccurring issues. So what we try to do is focus our attention on some of these when we get time to focus our attention on. Of course, we have a lot of complaints that come in about a lot of different things that have to do with traffic safety, speeding, and all kinds of different things in neighborhoods, people cutting through and different things. But these are some of the streets that we focus a lot of our attention on because of the numerous complaints we've had over the years since I've been here. Keener Boulevard, you can see some of the stats. The PD and PI is the property damage or personal injury. On Keener Boulevard, we had, I don't think I really need to go too deep into it with it, but you can see that we've had some incidents there on those streets, and it kind of lays it all out there. And anyone can get this information from me after this if they want.
Hey, Chief, can you go back to that real quick?
Yes, sir.
Quick question on I-85, because again, that's a high number in relation to all the others outside of Wilkinson Boulevard and Main Street. What year did we take over I-85? To give a little context in regards to what I mean by take over I-85.
We got it back as far as us being responsible for the collisions.
Right.
Policing it.
What year did we take that over from the state?
From some of the previous conversations, I believe it was 7 or 8 years ago.
7 or 8 years
Yeah, it
ago.
was before I came back to Belmont.
And just to get some context, we're fully responsible in regards to accidents that happen on that. That's why these numbers are showing up on this data report for the city. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Well, when you define what you mean by responsible.
Well, we're the ones that are, Corky, could you
You
probably?
have to work the accent.
Yeah,
If a collision happens on I-85 in the city limits of Belmont, we handle the collision or anything that happens out there. We've had people shoot each other on the roadway, drop road rage and things. If anything happens on the interstate that's in the city, incorporated city limits, we are not, I would say, responsible, but we handle it. It's ours.
but in other municipalities, particularly our neighboring ones, the state handles it, correct? The highway patrolman, or is that not correct?
It's not correct. In Gastonia handles all the incorporated city limits.
Okay,
I think the only one right now in the stretch of Gaston County as far as I-85 that isn't handled by, let's see, the highway patrol handles the little stint between, us and say McCannville and Gastonia, between the 21 and 22, in Lowell, and then McCannville kind of area, kind of curved and places in McCannville, but they have a little bit of the interstate past the bridge. And then anything outside the incorporated city limits of Gastonia, out past Bessemer City Road, the highway patrol picks that back up to the state line.
okay,
That's how that works.
thank you.
Yeah, but the incorporated cities, as far as that goes, us and Gastonia are the ones who, have the interstate for that purpose. Good.
Good, good.
Traffic studies that we've utilized, we have a device called Spell Stack. You may see it on some of the telephone poles. It's a little box, it runs a little tube out, and it picks up and monitors the average speeds. And so, like I said earlier, we have certain streets which reoccur, and so instead of being reactive, we're proactive. So we keep an updated study on certain streets unless someone calls in and complains about a street that we haven't had previously. But these are some of the streets that we have completed these stealth studies. We try to keep them up to date because when we have citizens call in and complain, or they complain to you guys and get filtered down, then we want to have this updated information to have an understanding of where we need to allocate our resources if there is an actual issue in that area or there is not. But we still, during all of these different studies, and I'll show you an example of that, these are some of the ones that we've done. We did 36 in 2021, 33 in 2022, and we've already done 26 this year. And that number will go up. This is an example of what I'm talking about. This is the actual printout from the software, from the device once we get it. This is the overview, an example of that. And it tells you like the start date and the end date, and we can arrange that depending on battery life. And then traffic-related issue was a speed complaint. This was on, I believe, Safer Street. And it tells you the location, which way the device is facing, because we can make it face a different direction to pick up certain cars traveling east, west, north, south. Sergeant Willett, Officer Purcell, there are two traffic officers. The speed limit on this road is 25 miles an hour. During the stint of the period that we had this device out there, there's 5,656 vehicles that travel on Safer Street during this time. Average speed was 17 miles an hour. 85% of the vehicles were traveling at 22.5 miles an hour or slower. The max speed of a vehicle, so someone was traveling at 55 miles an hour, one vehicle that was late at night. Out of that amount of vehicles, 53 vehicles exceeded the posted speed limit by more than 10 miles an hour. The recommendations by the traffic unit, and we have these for every single one of the sales tax studies. Based upon these results of this specific study, there is a small number of vehicles speeding. There will be supplemental studies completed. The traffic unit will continue to monitor traffic. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we've done upwards of 6 on Safe Road. We've put the traffic trailer out there in many different places across the city, depending on complaints and everything to monitor everything, try to get people to slow down. So those are some of the things that we do to try to mitigate some of the speeding in town. Traffic monitoring utilizing radar. I'll tell you this, as a core, some agencies don't send all of their officers to radar school. Some people pick, depending on how long you've been there, kind of graduate as you go to go to radar school. I send every one of my officers to radar school. It's mandatory. So you work for the Belmont Police Department and you're a road officer. If you're a detective, you don't really need to clock cars in the detective bureau. So we kind of lenient on that aspect. If you work on the road in Belmont, every one of the officers is radar certified. Sometimes that's overlooked when the certification goes down, but we make them go back and get it if that happens. So, with that said, there's a lot of people out here running radar. when they have time and they're not answering other calls. So, in 2021, these are some of the streets that we talked about, and some of the actual, we used radar to monitor that. Other than discuss that, we have this to back up some of our findings, and actually a presence a lot of times will slow people down. So we try to be present in some of these areas that are reoccurring to where it'll slow people down, but also get a, because when the police car's there, then people are not going to go as fast, let's just be real. Unless we sit in people's driveway and hide, and we're not really in the business of doing that, but we will if we have to. So these are some of the different radar studies that we've completed since 2021 and 2023. As you can see, every year we've completed over 100. This right here is a man-hours spent on DWI and license checkpoints. We have a DWI officer who's granted, you guys approved him, Tim Dunlap. And his specific job is DWI enforcement. He's on a grant through the Governor's Highway Safety, which y'all are familiar with. Just want to make sure I touched on that a little bit. So he's out here every day, and so these are some of the checkpoints, DWI license checkpoints, regular checkpoints, and man-hours that are spent on making sure our streets are trying to be safer as far as it goes with DWI reduction. And 2021, we spent 499 man-hours on this initiative, and 2022, 431.5, and then so far, we have 396. Just this past Friday night, we conducted a DWI checkpoint on Kingdom Boulevard that was pre-planned, which I was out till about 1 o'clock in the morning with mothers and drunk drivers. We do several of these every year, so some of that is part of this. This right here is speed complaints. There's an avenue for people who want to call in speed complaints. There's actually on the city's website, there's a link to a portal. So click here, and you can go on there, and then there's a form to fill out. But this is just specifically for traffic enforcement, but there's a complaint or compliment form that goes along with this on the police department site through the city website as well, where you can complain about something. We handle a lot of things, even things that are not police related. We handle it. Right? We get a lot of stuff. So if we can't handle it, we can get you to the right person. So sometimes things get filtered to us. But you can make compliments on our officers, you can complain. We get a little bit of both. But we handle all of those. These are some of the ones that's been made on the city's website. And the ones on the right side, it touches on the ones that are being made at other methods. What I'll tell you about this is what you see is some pretty good data. But when someone calls me or calls one of the administrators about something, sometimes I don't think that data gets on there. So I'd say that these complaints, there's more complaints about than what's listed here. But there is an avenue for people, and if you go on the city's website and you have a speeding complaint, please go on there and fill the form out. And you can list as much information as you want to. And if you list your contact information, I promise you someone will call back and get right on top of it. What I will tell you about that is that we do receive a lot of complaints. So when we focus on an area for a complaint, you got to understand we only have so many officers. So sometimes we have to refocus our attention in different places depending on the situation and what our studies and stats tell us, because it's data-driven, the enforcement action or education and stuff. So we tend to bounce across the city sometimes. Vehicle collisions contributed to speed. In 2021, there was 1,820 collisions. The number of collisions caused by speed were 114. And 6.26% of those were caused by speed. So in 2022, there was 2,046, so that was split in half as far as the percentages caused by speed. In 2022, we did put another officer in the traffic unit, so that probably has a little bit to do with that. So the reduction there. And so far this year, we're at 2.02% as far as speed collisions contributed by speed. The total traffic stops we completed in 2021 were 3,883. Citations issued were 1,146 with 39 written ones. 2022, we stopped over 3,496 cars, 855 citations with 70 warnings, and so far already we've stopped 3,081 cars and 592 citations and wrote 60 citations. So that number will definitely increase before the end of the year. So just wanted to kind of highlight some of the things that we do to mitigate some of the things that are happening and how we're involved in traffic safety already, and we're trying to do the best that we can. traffic safety ideas, I'm kind of going into a different direction for a second. But this is some of the things that I kind of came up with, and then through discussion with the city manager, I think maybe some of our attention needs to be refocused on some of the things that we do because of the uptick of different pedestrian collisions that we've had over numerous amounts of years. So some of the things, let me back up. So I do a lot of teaching. I teach PTO, which is police training officer stuff. And I teach a lot of principles with leadership and different things. And one of the things that we teach in our PTO process is, sorry, lost my thought. Sorry, too many words at once, I guess. Is, we teach what's called PBL, problem-based learning. It's ideas, known facts, learning issues, action plans, and evaluations. And what that does is focus on ill-structured problems. So when I went into this, I started thinking about ideas. That's the first thing that comes to my head because that's what I train people on, right? And so I think I took a look at it and said, and took a lot of the different things in. And so the ideas were that these are the things that we could do. And there was facts, there's been an uptick in pedestrians, right? And I can kind of go into it a little bit more, but just the basics. Research and implement, these are some of the things that I thought about we could do, along with some of the conversations we had with staff. Research and implement a pedestrian and traffic safety initiative. Continue to educate students on all grade levels on pedestrian safety. Create a pamphlet related, I already have that in the works. A trifold pamphlet that's related to educational for everyone, not just based on school, but for everyone in the public. I think we can all learn from some of the things that we do and some of the things that we don't think about and make mistakes on, because we're all human. Create a pamphlet related to pedestrian and other traffic safety topics, educate the public through all available social media platforms. We currently have over 10,000 followers just on our Facebook page. So we push things out, we do push a lot of things out related to events and a lot of different things, even on inclement weather. It touches a lot of people, and they see it, and they share it. And I do appreciate all the shares we get, because as much information we can get out there is better. Include educational information in our water bills. That was brought up. What we do, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but we do a radio station broadcast. Sergeant Green, with the community coordinator sergeant, he's touched base with the local radio station, and we do what's called Safety Matters. We do this, and go on the website. There's a link on our website. We're on there. It's just WSCGE 91.7 FM. We talk about safety on there, all different aspects of safety and what's relevant at the time. We bring different people on the radio station for about a 5 or 10 minute broadcast as a part of their broadcast, and they gave us some time on the radio station to where we actually talk about safety. That's already been implemented, something that's been ongoing for a good bit of time. But I wanted to touch on that because I don't think a lot of people know what all we do and how we're involved. So I want to get the information out to you. And this is something that Tiffany touched on with the stuff that she was talking about with the pedestrian plan, right? One of the recommendations in the pedestrian plan was NC Vision Zero. And how this came about for me, because I was unaware of that aspect of it, is when all this took place and the meeting was called, I called my friend at DOT, and I asked him about some stuff, because I called him about some of the issues that we have with crosswalks, intersections and things, and for improvements, besides what the city manager does and other staff. I keep in contact with him because we do what's called team Gaston meetings, and we meet quarterly as a county, all the chiefs and different administrators across the county. As Gaston as a whole, we meet quarterly with DOT and all the different other stakeholders involved in protecting, the streets in the city, across the county. So we actually take a deep dive into any of the fatalities that happen. And DOT's perspective is if there's something, roadway conditions or environment that they can improve on, then they like to hear about it, get that feedback. So we take a deep dive into those things and other different topics related to the upcoming different roadway things that we're going to be faced with 85 and 74 widening and different bridges and things. So we're heavily involved in that sort of thing. But I was unaware that this existed until I spoke to him. And he said in Charlotte, about a year ago, they had an uptick in pedestrians being struck, and it was mainly related to homeless people and transient people who were walking out into the roadway and getting hit. But he said, I think you need to call over there. He gave me a couple of people's nationwide initiative to combat fatalities and serious crashes. So I kind of took a little dive into it kind of quick, and I really like it, and I think it's something that we should look at adopting, and I'm kind of touch on it. What is Vision Zero? Vision Zero originating in Sweden in 1997 is a traffic safety approach focused on eliminating traffic deaths and serious injuries while improving access to safe, sustainable, and equitable mobility for everyone. Setting zero as the acceptable target, Vision Zero sends a strong message that deaths on the transportation network are unacceptable and preventable. Vision Zero represents a shift by acknowledging that responsibility for preventing road deaths is a shared one, meaning designers of the transportation system, i.e. planners, engineers, public health professionals, law enforcement, and elected officials must work collaboratively to ensure a safe system by addressing the root causes and inequities in traffic deaths. So it shows you that we all need to work together to accomplish the goal. 6 key organizing principles of the safe system approach. Deaths and serious injuries are unacceptable. While no crashes are desirable, the safe system approach prioritizes crashes that result in death and serious injury, since no one should experience either when utilizing a transportation system. And humans make mistakes. People will inevitably make mistakes and can lead to crashes, but the transportation system can be designed and operated to accommodate human mistakes and injury tolerances to avoid death and serious injury. I think that's where some of the things as far as crosswalks and different improvements as it relates to Belmont can definitely be looked at. I think the transportation committee is a great thing. I think this may be something as an offset of that would involve the community a little bit more than what you were discussing earlier. But humans are vulnerable, and people have limits for tolerating crash forces, as what Tiffany discussed earlier, and I have a slide as well on it. The higher the speed, the more serious injury you have. At a speed of 55 miles an hour or greater, usually if you get in a T-bone accident and you sustain closed head trauma, your organs actually move around in your body, including your brain, and it usually causes death over 55 miles an hour in a T-bone crash. This is things that I know, I'm sorry, I'm filled with information that has to do with that because I was a traffic officer myself, so it's kind of dear to my heart. So humans are vulnerable, and so, we're not as tough as cars, okay? So, if we get hit by one and we run into one, usually we're going to bounce off, and we're going to get in. So, responsibility is shared, all stakeholders, transportation system users and managers, vehicle manufacturers must ensure crashes don't lead to a fatal or serious injury. And what I'll say is, all stakeholders means everyone, including the public, and when I look through this, it talks about everyone as far as not just people that you don't even think about, like the doctors that see the people who come in the hospital, who see the injuries and see what causes it, because they ask what happened. When I've taken people in, I was on the fire department before I was a police officer, so when you take people in, the doctors want to know how it happened. They want you to break it down for them, and you have to tell them so they can treat the injury, right? So there's a lot of different things that we can all, as stakeholders, come together collaboratively and sit down at the table and discuss and try to come up with different things that we can make successful for Belmont as far as an initiative. Safety is proactive. Proactive tools should be used to identify and mitigate latent risk in the transportation system rather than waiting on crashes to occur and reacting afterwards. That's where the proactiveness comes into place. And redundancy is crucial. Reducing risk requires that all parts of the transportation system are strengthened so that if one part fails, then the others still protect people. Why is Vision Zero in Belmont? We have had over 5,100 accidents from 2021 to current, resulting in 88 personal injuries and 3 fatalities. From 2021 to current, we've had 19 pedestrians traveling by foot or on bicycle that were involved in accidents. Of those 19 pedestrians involved in traffic accidents, 3 pedestrians were killed and 2 sustained serious injury. This is exactly the same slide, it's just laid out a little different. It talks about the differences in speed and how the personal injuries will go up as far as speed as it goes up. Vision Zero recommendations. Create an advisory group or task force, the Transportation Committee. It's kind of already there, so it's things that we're already doing. To communicate with community members and advise on strategies and monitor progress and ensure established goals are met. Design and implement a Vision Zero initiative around our community's needs. Ensure allocation of resources based on data-driven solutions, what we talked about earlier. Prioritize safety measures for pedestrians, bicyclists, scooter riders, and people with disabilities. Prioritizing underinvested areas in the communities. Some people can't afford cars. Some people have to walk. It's more prevalent in other cities that I work in. So some people don't have the access to transportation, so they have to walk. So what do? We involve them in the stakeholders that we have the discussion on to try to figure out from their level, from their eyesight, what can we do to improve things for you, because some people have to do certain things to make it to where they're at, where they're going, or catch a ride, so to speak. Increase government accountability through public participation and public report provisions. And Vision Zero resolution proposal. A Vision Zero resolution is a valuable tool for formalizing and prioritizing and pursuing policies that can help locality eliminate fatal and severe traffic crashes and improve mobility for all community members. A resolution can also be valuable for community advocates and organizers who are seeking commitment and action by local government to create safe, connected, healthy, and equitable transportation systems in partnerships with communities. Staff recommendations for the City Council is to adopt a resolution to establish Belmont's commitment to Vision Zero as the initiative. Conclusion of Vision Zero alone cannot eliminate all traffic fatalities and severe injuries or solve all of the traffic problems. This approach must work in tandem with other transportation policy and planning efforts such as complete streets policies, long-range planning, active transportation plans, and new mobility policies. Reducing fatalities and severe injuries is just one component of traffic safety. As I mentioned, there's all kinds of different things that we already do as a result of traffic safety. Collisions resulting in minor injuries and near misses and issues related to enforcement and personal safety also affect people's experience with traffic safety and their perceptions of that. And so, I don't have anything else. I'd love to entertain questions.
Kind of more maybe a recommendation or statement, because I know this is kind of fluid as we have these conversations, but I think it might be prudent to have someone from the police department or fire department who is also a representative on this transportation committee. So someone from maybe the staff included, maybe whoever Corky so chooses, or Corky himself. Number two, kind of leading into that, I would be interested to see, because you guys see this firsthand, I know the fire department, for example, is responding to pretty much all medical needs, which will happen on the roads, as you guys are also responding to that. So I would be curious from y'all's perspective as well, not necessarily just the complaints we receive, but you guys, I'm sure, have already identified which roads already need a lot of help or kind of review, I should say. So I'd be really interested in that for future conversations as well.
I have a question. This NC Vision Zero, we have not yet adopted that in Belmont, correct?
We have not, and I will tell you, through looking at all the different material, there's actually, everything's already laid out for you. The resolution is already there. I didn't prepare it for today. I think that's for another day. But it's all laid out there, and all you have to do is fill in our name and adopt it.
And so I would imagine that we'd all be favorably disposed towards that. But once we pass that resolution, which I'm assuming would be on the consent agenda perhaps at our next meeting, so like what is that? So let's say we pass the resolution, what happens then as a practical matter?
I think we would move forward with having set up some kind of push out that we're going to have this, and push out something to the public through water bills and all the different aspects of social media to try to get some people from the public and different entities, like I talked about earlier with the stakeholders, involved in sitting down at a table and discussing this. And what I'll tell you is looking through Charlotte's stuff, it's all laid out for you. Their first meeting to their 33rd meeting, there's a PowerPoint for each one of them. And so it kind of, everything's laid out for you to sit there and dive into. And
so like there's a standard approach and standard materials for this Vision Zero that we would adhere to that would come into play once we pass the resolution.
Yes, sir. And I do believe some of it would be relevant to Belmont and other things that's in there or not, because every city is different.
Okay. But there's like something structured that would come from passing the resolution, not just like,
absolutely. And I think it's something that you guys set the time limit on. The goal, the ultimate goal, is to have no more fatalities and no more serious injury crashes. That's saying a lot, but I think if you set that goal, if you don't have goals, like I tell my son, if you don't have goals, you're not gonna have another goal. You gotta keep continuing to have goals. Even now, with what I do, I got goals, you know, and so I think the goal would be, to be successful, but, also, like I said earlier, when we talk about the PBO process, the evaluation, you look at what worked and what didn't, and you come back to the table again, and you try again until you get it right.
So do they have like a sort of general time frame where you kind of like get to zero, or?
Charlotte's been doing it since either I think it's 2017 or 2019, and they set their goal for 2030.
Okay, okay.
To
Because I
give
mean,
you an idea.
yeah, because that really kind of appeals to me because it's a very specific and measurable goal. Like you either get to zero or you don't.
Right.
And then it sounds like it's a very comprehensive program from what you're telling us. So, I mean, I think it sounds like a great idea.
And
It
I
sounds
haven't,
like we're taking some of these steps already with our planning committee. I'm curious, other than Charlotte, I mean, what is the success rate of this? I mean, are people embracing this, the communities?
it's, I didn't really get that far into it. I'll tell you that they revisited with the thing about a year ago. The lieutenant over there was telling me, when this came up, because they already had it implemented, they were able, it was like what Jim's saying, it's structured, you go right back to it, depending on what the situation is that you're faced with. And it's all structured for you to take it and roll with it and try to mitigate the issue.
I mean, it seems like it's hard, though. I mean, we can have all these policies and procedures in place, and certainly I think that's something we want to do, but, you know, at the end of the day, let's say somebody goes out and gets really drunk and staggers into a busy highway. I mean, does that mean we failed, or, you know, what? You know, it just seems, you know, but I also understand that really should be the only goal that we have is zero, but it's difficult.
I agree completely, because, you know, you do have the human factor involved, and let's just be real. Not every time people make good decisions, and so, but I think as a community, if we have that commitment, I think, and we can get the people involved, I think we can try our best to get as close to that as possible. I don't know that it's an achievable goal overall, but I feel like it can be done. It's going to take some work.
Any more questions for the chief? I had a quick question about, because I know you mentioned in there about educational programs for children in the schools. Could you just elaborate a little bit on that, like what you're thinking there?
Well, what I will tell you is, if you notice, I put the word "continue" in there because we're already doing that in the school, but it's not focused on pedestrian safety and specifically, we do it on all kinds of different topics. So we would definitely try to refocus our attention on that because that's the issue at hand. And it wouldn't be just one age group. I mean, I really feel like if you hit the children when they're young, it seems in a lot more than when it's middle school or high school. But I think even if you hit them when they're young, if you remind them that this is what needs to happen and kind of follow up with them as they age, maybe it regenerates the thought that this is the proper way to cross it across, and this is the, don't speed, you know, that sort of thing. All of those different safety topics. I think that if you focus that attention on that, I think there will be some kind of positive results from it.
Go ahead.
Okay. When you were flipping through the slides with all the statistics about like where you're targeting, like the speed studies and the enforcement and all that, could you just talk a little bit about what you're doing around the area on South Point Road by the two schools? Because I've gotten a lot of concerns from parents about there's a lot of kids out walking on the sidewalk. There's obviously a very busy traffic corridor. Could you just maybe talk a little bit about what we're doing down there?
We have the school crossing guard at the middle school, which of course I've seen her post something about people being on their phones while they're stuck in traffic right there. That's one of those things that I can't control as far as being stuck in traffic. I'm stuck in the same traffic every morning, okay? But I'll say that we really focus our attention, and we do studies in the beginning of the year to see how things are going to go. This year, in previous years, we actually pulled everyone, over 16 employees, out to make sure that, you know, school started without a hitch. I'll tell you that there's a lot of people who drop their kids off in the neighborhoods. There's a lot of people who drop their kids off in Harris Teeter in the Chick-fil-A parking lot, and they walk across the street. But I see them in the mornings, And I see the middle school kids and I see the high school kids crossing right there. And for the most part, when they cross in a group in the morning before school, it's pretty safe. I'll tell you this too, we've tried to hire a crossing guard for a year and a half. We've came close to hiring a couple people and they backed out on us. So if anyone knows anyone who would like to be a crossing guard, please let me know because we're hiring for a crossing guard. It's a position that's been open since one of our gentlemen, he retired and went to High Point, live where his daughter's at. So if anyone knows someone who's stay at home in the mornings and the afternoons, it's one of those things that's kind of hard because it's a couple hours in the morning and a couple hours in the afternoons. It's more geared towards people who are retired, but if there's a stay-at-home mom or dad, a nanny who wants to do it, it's got a couple hours, please let us know because we really need another crossing guard. Not for that intersection, but for Orel, Stowe, and Keener. We had a complaint there and we restriped the crossing, made contact with DOT, we put some signs up, but I just cannot, that's where I want to put that person at. But I can't get someone hired to do it.
Is there anything that you need from us to help with that? Like, is it like a scheduling issue? Is it a pay issue?
It's really not a pay issue. I mean, it's not, they don't pay the greatest.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's gonna get rich being a.
But I will tell you that the pay increased up to when the last pay study was done a couple of years back. The pay did increase to over $15 an hour. It's up past that now. But it is like a part-time job. I mean, we're spread pretty thin on manpower, and I would love to tell you that I'd sit here and accomplish all these goals with what we have, but if I had more manpower, I could probably do a better job at mitigating some of these things, because I'll tell you, traffic safety and things that involve speeding and different things like that is our number one complaint in Belmont. We have things that happen at Walmart. We have things that happen throughout the city with break-ins and different things, just like everyone else. But the number one thing that we deal with every single day, and things that we've been doing since I've been here over 6 years now, is traffic. Traffic's an issue as far as speeding complaints and different people cutting through neighborhoods. Those when things get congested. So we're constantly dealing with that, and I'll tell you that we do really good in the beginning with dealing with 1 or 2 or 3 complaints, but we're kind of spread thin to where we can't be everywhere, and we have to kind of, like I said earlier, we have to bounce around to try to mitigate these things and focus our attention to what's prevalent at the time. And that, that spreads our employees thin, and we do many events and other different things, and I'm not going to go too far into depth for that, but I would say that would be helpful.
Thank you, first of all, for the presentation tonight. It was very helpful. While we're on that topic of the crossing guards, because I hit that freeway every day going down by South Point and further down the peninsula. Ideally, how many crossing guards would you have in that stretch there from Bellwood, really, to Orel, Stowe? Because I see one at Bellwood. Sometimes I see one when school gets out at McKee Farm. I don't think there's one at the Chick-fil-A. I think
there's not one at the Chick-fil-A.
Yeah.
It would be good to have one there and the one that I was telling you about on Orel, Stowe, and Keener. We're allocated one more position. The one that I can't fill. Even if you allocated the position, I don't know that I can fill it, but I'd love to have it. You know what I mean? But yes, I do think it's something that would be helpful for us to have at that location at Chick-fil-A. But we also had to look at it from the standpoint of where we had our crossing guards at prior at the middle school. We had 2 at the location where it was, and we allocated our resources to where when we did our studies and stuff, where we thought that was going to be better, because the markings and the little lights and things at the one Chick-fil-A are a little bit better than the other stuff. But again, I'd love to have another position to do that, but I'd love to be able to fill both of them as well.
It doesn't seem like you've got as much foot traffic coming south of Bellwood as you do going, across the Stowe Road, across the Harris Teeter. So there is one typically though at Bellwood Drive.
Yeah.
Do they get a lot of traffic that way?
They get some.
Could they be maybe better utilized at one of the other?
Well, I would love to. That's the thing about crossing guards and that sort of thing. So once you put someone somewhere, it's really hard to reallocate them, because the way we look at it from the aspect of safety is if there's one child across the street and there's someone there, then we want to keep them there. That way we know that that one child that crosses that intersection every day is safe when they cross that intersection every day. And so once you allocate someone there, it's hard to pull them back. Because then if something happens, then where are you at? And I don't want to live with that.
Okay. One other question on that, the Vision Zero plan. So is that just, so so I get an understanding of what it is that you might need from us in the future to enact this if we were to approve it. Is this like a platform that you would adopt? Is it like a series of best practices with that implied goal of, zero fatalities? Is there an investment required?
I think the investment is the aspect of the streets and the infrastructure part as far as justice is concerned. As far as money and grants and different things like that, I think that's a possibility. I really think it's just a collaborative effort to try to all come together and try to meet the goal. That's something that the police department that we do is makes us successful, I feel like, is I have an open door policy, and all of my administrators, we sit in a room and we meet about different things and we work it out. When you have over 100 years of experience in a room, why not use it, right? So we collaboratively sit down at the table so we know what that looks like. We know what success looks like because we try to figure out what's the best option, what's the best practice, and how to implement it, and then we follow up on that sort of thing. I think it's the same principle, and I think that's how you measure your success through the evaluation portion of the problem-based learning thing. That's what it's about.
Chief, I just say I like what you brought us with Vision Zero and the education aspect. And I hope we can get the crossing guards, and if we need to incentivize those positions a little bit, I'll be open to hearing how to do that. The crossing guards that I've got experience with were at Belmont Middle School as an older gentleman, and the kids loved him and they knew him. They would listen to him. He had control of those intersections. I mean, he would literally go up and take that flag and beat on the car if they moved too far into the striped area. So, I mean, he was
great. He sold his house, he lived beside Arby's, he sold his house and moved to High Point with his daughter, and I wish we still had him.
Yeah, he really took control of the situation.
Absolutely.
Anything else for the chief?
Thank you for presenting this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think this is the email that Martha referenced. Okay, was there any other discussion you'd like to have on this topic?
Do you guys need any direction from us, Ron, in regards to what the chief just presented? With Vision Zero?
Yeah, I was looking back at all my notes, just to make sure I had all the direction for all the discussion. For Vision Zero, I think that we're probably gonna take a deeper dive on our side of it, just to make sure that we have everything that we need. We're knowledgeable, we can speak knowledgeable to that as far as the resolution is concerned. And if there's any, like Jason said, any kind of like funding aspects that would go along with it. And so I think that we'll bring that back a little bit further, have some more dialogue on that, probably when the resolution will be presented at some point in the future. Given it is part of the PED plan, it's down inside of it, but if that's something that we want to bring out now and go ahead and approve before the end of the fiscal year, into the calendar year, then we can do that. So, we'll bring that back very soon, for approval. The next thing that I had, just to make sure we're all on the same page, is I've got a checkbox to look at, the downtown area as a whole, regarding speed reduction possibilities on that side of it. And, did I miss anything? As far as the transportation committee is concerned, I think we've talked about that. We'll bring that back as far as if there's any bylaws that need to be changed, and then the recommendations from the staff, and then let council determine who may be the liaisons on there.
Okay. There was one other thing that I wanted to run by the council with our traffic calming policy, and whether we would be interested.
Say that what?
Traffic calming, speed bumps.
Yeah.
So we have an existing policy. It's 3 or 4 pages long. In my opinion, it's rather onerous. Though I am led to believe that there are reasons for some of that complication. So I kind of discussed this with Miles offline about whether we want to ask staff to look at whether it makes sense to revise that policy. Charlotte just did this recently, sort of streamlined their policy, made it a lot easier for residents over there to request traffic devices in their neighborhoods. Because right now our policy requires, I think it's 60% of the neighbors on the street to sign a petition that then goes to the city. We do a couple studies, speed studies. I think there's some engineering involved, and it's very complicated. There are a lot of reasons for the way it's written that way, but I don't know that it's been looked at in a while. I think it might make sense to maybe explore whether it's worth updating that. So I just wanted to run that by the council to see if there's any interest in having staff kind of go down that route.
I don't have any opposition to a policy review.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's fine with me as well.
Okay. Alrighty.
Before we conclude, I mean, I think it would be pertinent for us to go ahead and put timetables in regards to this, just so that we don't lose sight of it.
Right.
So as far as conclusion to the committee, I mean, Miles, and please jump in as well, because I want you to have input on this as well from the staff's perspective. Are we looking at maybe the next council meeting for the committee itself, establishing it, the bylaws, or I say appointing, but appointing the council member, whoever those council members are, and then October, potentially, I guess in the next month, appointing the citizens, is that correct?
Yeah, I think assuming staff can make that timetable work, I think that makes sense.
Yes, as long as we're talking about the October 2nd meeting instead of the workshop on Monday, I think that would make better sense, especially if there's bylaws associated with it. But as far as the staff perspective on it, and the number of folks that will be on there from the staff, I think we can handle that. So I think that's reasonable to have that in October.
So Alex, you're saying just for the staff and council positions, the public positions, does that allow enough time for like applications?
I think we need Jamie's input on that, or Miles' input in regards to
We'll
publication.
be, over the next couple of weeks, advertising what open positions we have for the different committees in the fall. I believe it's Main Street, possibly Parks and Rec, possibly Planning Board, so we'll add that to just that list. I would have to do before you officially adopt it though, as long as you guys are okay with that. I mean, you know you're gonna adopt something, so I would just put it as an advertisement for that particular committee. And then, once you adopt it, it would just be included in the interviews that we'll do, before the October meeting and before the workshop in October. If we have to, we can possibly move it to November, but I want them done before
Yeah,
December.
I think as long as procedurally we're okay to advertise for the citizen spots without,
Parks, so do you think we'll be fine on that, and advertising prior to council's vote on that, if we've given you kind of majority recommendation tonight?
I think you could go ahead and advertise it, and then once you couldn't do the appointment.
Yeah, just so we can kind of start collecting applications.
Yeah, because you would probably wouldn't do any of the appointments till the second meeting anyway, which would be ideally the workshop in October. So you would have already voted or any bylaws or anything you'd already voted on in October.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that takes care of the first one in regards to timing, in regards to transportation committee. In regards to vision, Vision Zero, I understand staff wants to take a look at that, so me personally, I'll respect that. But number 3, in regards to the policy that you brought up, timing on that one as well.
How long do you guys think you'd need to do a policy review on that?
Give us, I mean, I have it printed, we probably could do a quick review, we probably look around and see if there's, however we need to improve. We already know that it's not on our website, it's like internal, so if somebody asks for it, we gotta send it, so that's already an update that we're doing right now. We're putting it on the website so that somebody can go to it and see it without asking staff for it. That's a checkbox. If you're saying that Charlotte has something that they created recently, I'll look at that and see what their policy is, and then we'll kind of do a deep dive on, there are certain criteria in here, and petitions, and there's a speed study by the police department that has to be completed, and then if we're gonna put something in place, there has to be a certain criteria for streets, so there's a little bit of engineering that goes along with it. And and then we have to install it, so there's some costs involved with it, and then there's a process for you all to approve it, and then there's a process for, citizens to ask for this thing to be removed as well, if it's approved and it's not serving a purpose, or if, certain citizens, sign a petition. I think it's 75% of the citizens.
Yeah, I couldn't remember the exact percentage.
Yeah, there's a percentage in there, so if they don't agree to have it removed, then there's that process that's included, so if you move parts on this one might take, where we at? We're in, we're September, give me till early, is November, like first November meeting date, okay?
That's fine. I'm honestly just asking this for transparency, so that we can put some.
Yeah, like, I think the point is to just get some commitment on dates so that we can kind of hold
Yep.
ourselves accountable. for
Correct.
them.
Yep.
Which department is going to be doing the review?
Administration, planning, public works, police department, everybody that touches this, parks, it's probably a comprehensive review from multiple departments, so that it kind of touches multiple departments as we move through it.
That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else?
Miles, we talked separately, I think maybe a few of us, others were involved in the conversation too, about having an offline, workshop. Kind of taking a deep dive with some of the folks from NCDOT on some, not just safety issues, but overall transportation issues that we're having on a go-forward basis. Do you see this transportation committee kind of taking the place of that, or would this be in addition to?
Yeah, so, from the conversation that we heard, I think the last council meeting, where there was a lot of NCDOT comments, and that request was for staff to go make some recommendations to NCDOT, get some feedback, formally request certain things. So, Tiffany and I went last week and spoke to NCDOT, had a full list of items, and so this is, the transportation committee, came out of that, conversation with NCDOT. We asked them to come and do like a sit-down roundtable session with council, and they said, well, here's what we do with other municipalities, and it may work because there's so much going on in Belmont right now with 85 and 74 and intersection improvements and just the growth in general, and a lot of state-maintained streets. And so they recommended that we put this quarterly meeting together instead of them coming at one time and then they're gone for a year or two or whatever it may be. Instead of like something standard we could be in front of them. They said that typically the way that it's structured, very similar to what we discussed here, and that staff would and the committee would formulate agenda items. We'd send that to NCDOT probably a couple weeks, 3 weeks to a month in advance, where they've got enough time. So Division 12 representative more than likely will be on the committee, but if it relates to I-85 widening, then that's not really Division 12. They have to go to the other division, the other district, wherever it may be, wherever it may fall. They have a rail line, so we have a rail line here with the trolley. So if there's a question on trolley, they have to get with NCDOT rail for certain questions. So you can see how if you send it to them, they need to like divvy out their stuff, get the answers, bring it back to the committee. So that was the recommendation, that we formulate this committee instead of like having like one time just come and talk through certain items.
Maybe just a comment to the committee itself, because I was just kind of trying to think of the workflow. I think it would almost be prudent for almost one of the initial meetings, I'm sure we usually do this, is to set up a work plan for that committee so that we have some substance each quarter. I find sometimes with maybe some of our advisory boards or citizen boards, maybe there's not enough substance. I definitely want to make sure we utilize every bit of time that we get with NCDOT. So I'd be interested to see that as well, whether or not I'm on there or not. Just curious to see the work plan. So maybe you might start thinking about that for that committee.
Someone who's been involved with work plans, having a work plan does not necessarily guarantee there will be substance.
Well, not necessarily, but it can at least get us in the right direction.
Yeah, but I think having some structure, we've been knowing in advance what we're gonna
And
ask.
that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, we'll maximize our time with them.
Having a strategy going into those meetings.
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm sure we could all sit there, whoever's on that committee, and talk for hours in regards to, again, looking for structure.
Much like we've been doing tonight.
Yes.
For the right
The other
reasons.
piece of that might be you guys need to establish how council is going to get the information from the committee, how you want them to disperse that information that they learned from the committee. Because that's the one thing I have noticed, is that you don't, not necessarily, it hasn't always been shared with everybody, so everybody's on the same page. How's it gonna flow?
I would think staff would distribute.
So do you want us to do minutes? Or what do you want us,
I think that's part of
yeah,
how we establish like